think so. So thanks, Ivan, for that excellent presentation. I think we've just had a crash course in EV charging infrastructure before we actually start the panel. As was just said, I'm the moderator for this morning's session. We're going to discuss EV charging infrastructure. I'm a strategy and planning consultant actually based in Dubai, and we advise public agencies, private sector, and others on smart mobility solutions, smart mobility strategy, roadmaps, and so on. So particularly putting this in the context of the electrification of road transportation, and it's not a 2050 agenda, it's actually we have 8 years to basically save the planet, so we need to start now. And as we heard yesterday, EV charging infrastructure is absolutely critical in the development of the electric vehicle ecosystem, framework, whatever you want to call it. And outside here we have examples and exhibits from the electric vehicles themselves, the battery technology that will power them, and the third pillar of this ecosystem is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So it's absolutely critical to the development of the sector and the decarbonisation of road transportation moving forward. And as we also heard yesterday, in many countries, and indeed parts of this region, it's also potentially the weakest link. It's the thing that really deters consumers, companies, operators from switching to electric vehicles or electric fleets. In fact, we heard from yesterday, one gentleman in the first session, where he had bought an electric vehicle, he actually gave it back because he couldn't find the charging infrastructure, the charging points to recharge his vehicle, which was doing 200 to 300 kilometers a day, when he needed to use it. Or if he could find one, it was out of order or it was being used by someone else. So for him, the absence or the lack of accessibility to charging infrastructure was a real problem, to the point where he gave back his EV and he went back to a petrol or a diesel vehicle to get around. So it is critical. Success in this context, I think, means charging infrastructure, which is in the right quantities or the scale, so the right number of charging points in the right locations where people actually need to access them or want to use them, at the right charging speeds or specifications, and also, as we've just been hearing, in ways that actually deliver a positive customer experience, are easy to use, easy to pay for, plug and charge, those sorts of concepts that we've just been hearing about. And when we say charging infrastructure as well, we need to just bear in mind that it's not just about the charging point, the hardware, the equipment, it's the software, it's the data, it's the processing, it's the data analytics, the customer propositions, the business models, the connections to the grid, all of the other enabling factors that go with the charging point. So it's quite a complex ecosystem to put together. And of course, as we've also been hearing, it's not just about cars, it's about commercial vehicles, the trucks, the buses, the taxis, the Ubers, the ride-hailing vehicles, full range of road transportation, and indeed even beyond that if we get onto maritime and aviation, which we're not going to talk about today. So huge agenda actually just to cover this one point about charging infrastructure. So this morning's session is about electric vehicle charging infrastructure, challenges and opportunities. And it's my pleasure to, and I hope they're all here, to introduce 4 speakers on our panel this morning. And if you could come up as I announce you. Firstly, we have Rohit Ramesh, who is Senior Product Manager at CITA EV Charger. Says here from the UK. Second up, Abilash Nair, Head of MENA Mobility at Naboodah Commercial Group. Thirdly, Sahil, Salam, Managing Director of Qpole. Services, LLC, based here in the UAE. And finally, Ivan Sousa, who is Commercial Director at Efacec Electric Mobility, based in Portugal.
It's a pleasure.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
So these are our panel of four speakers, all experts, I think, either on the engineering side, on the design, the management, the planning of customer propositions of electric charging infrastructure. So the way we're going to run the next 50 minutes basically is that I'm going to invite each of the panelists just to introduce themselves, because I think they can introduce themselves in their own words better than I can, to just introduce their company and what they do, and also any initial thoughts on the topic, which I would remind you is EV charging infrastructure, opportunities and challenges. So brief introduction statements from each of our panelists, and then we're going to have some prepared moderated questions covering a range of issues, and then summing up. And if anyone, at several points, if anyone from you, the audience, want to ask a question, we have microphones on the left and on the right. I'll invite points where you can come up and ask a question, so don't feel shy. It's basically your session. So basically ask any questions that you want answers to. So with that, I will ask Rohit to kick off. Just introduce yourself and your initial thoughts, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the first edition of Electric Vehicle Innovation Summit in Abu Dhabi. So I'm Rohit Ramesh. I'm the product manager here at CITA EV Charger. So CITA EV is a charge point manufacturer and solution provider based out of UK. We have a branch office here in the Middle East, in the Dubai, for the MENA operations and support. So CITA EV is a complete portfolio of solution provider, from home charging to commercial charging solution, from 7 kilowatt wall boxes to 150, and even we are working on a 350 kilowatt DC depot charging solutions, and also combining with the state-of-the-art software solutions with charge point management systems and mobile application that will give you end-to-end payment gateway systems and load management and solutions tailor-made to each and every sector in the market. So that is what we offer here, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic here with the other panelists regarding charging infrastructure. So the infrastructure plays a very key role in building this road to mobility, a greener mobility future. So like we see a lot of electric vehicles coming into the market. As we can see in the event here, there's so many new brands, so many different manufacturers are bringing the variant of electric vehicle. Now it is the fact of whether there is the infrastructure available to help these electric vehicles to be charged on wherever destination they go, whether it's at home or workplace or in malls or in a destination charger when they are on the road. So my initial thoughts are Middle East market is growing. It's bringing in a lot of opportunities. A lot of new regulations are coming in place that is enhancing and encouraging to move to this greener mobility into the market. We will discuss more in the panel. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Rohit. So Abilash, same question, just introduce yourself and MENA Mobility at Al Naboodah Group.
Yeah. Thank you, John, and once again welcoming all of you to this one of a kind or a first of its kind electric vehicle innovation summit. These three words, electric vehicle and innovation, these are the three main drivers for the current new world post-COVID as well. So as MENA Mobility, we are very proud to announce that we have installed some of the large EV charging stations in the region. That includes with companies like Deva, RTA, ADNOC over here, and of course with some of the major OEMs in the market as well. That includes Porsche, Audi, and so on. We are actually we are an implementer of these technologies. So we are partners of ABB in the market with ABB chargers, of course, but chargers is just one part of the pie. The challenge is to install them at locations, as Mr. Rohit said. It varies from homes to malls to your office spaces to public charging. So each one has its own certain nuances that that cause problems at every installation. But of course, that's another small part of the pie because EV charging infrastructure is a bigger installment. So your customer is important, your customer's needs are important, and of course, unless and until his entire ecosystem is electrified, we cannot say that a completely new electrification strategy is in place. So from an implementer point of view, we do face certain problems with the regulators. Of course, there are visions, but I think it's still in the primitive stages of evolution. And we really look forward to installing more chargers in the region. For example, we have also been privileged to be the integrators for the electric bus pilot project in Dubai, which was first of its kind in the region. And from there, I think the government is also keen on implementing them, and we are very happy to support them in those initiatives. With some, apart from that, now I feel that the new engagement would be in the electric boats and the marine applications too, where electric boats are another set of challenges because water and electricity never go together. But still, there are technologies already being implemented, and we're proud to announce that some companies are already looking at implementing them over here, and we're proud to be leading that initiatives. Thinking about the future. So we have started with cars, trucks, buses, now boats, and in the future we might do it for planes as well. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Abilash. And Sahil, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Jonathan, for the nice introduction. Myself, Sahil Abdul Salam. I'm the Managing Director of Qpole Energy Services. Basically, we are an infrastructure provider for electric vehicle charging, right from identifying the right location, the revenue models, the infrastructure requirements like the source of power, the parking infrastructure, the signage, statutory approval as a whole package. So we are closely working with DEVA, and we have installed more than 50 chargers in various locations. And Qpole specifically focus on a solar energy driven EV charging because we identified the biggest challenge in this EV charging business is to add power to an existing network, whether it's a home or a building or even a public infrastructure. So the easy way to compensate is generate green energy, connect to the grid, and go to the real goal of EV charging and EVs. So we have similar experience in this kind of large projects, especially with RTA municipality and mostly into street furnitures, which has helped to be in the first set of contractors or service providers in this field. So we are very happy to be a part of this discussion, and we look forward for a very fruitful outcome for this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sahil. And last but not least, Ivan. And I know you may have presented some of this just now, but not everyone was here just now. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much to being here. It's a pleasure. So at the presentation before, I present my company. So it's Efacec. We are based in Portugal. We have office in USA. Our main factory is in Portugal, and we do all the chargers over there. Regarding DC chargers, we have more than 7K chargers installed, all the data that we have collected. And we provide charging solutions to our clients from AC to DC, all the software. And the big differentiation that we have from the market, we can customize everything, okay, and deliver kind of value to our clients, okay? Thank you.
Okay. Before we get started, does anyone have any questions from the audience to kick off straight away? So can you just come forward to the mic, please? And if you could just give your name and organization and your question.
Okay. Good morning. This is Mohammed Al-Mujani. I'm from Oman Oil Marketing. Actually, my question might jump to the conclusion, actually, which is the challenges here. We have a pilot of, 3-4 chargers, where the main, also when we started to develop the business, the main issue or the main challenges is the supply, the lead time. The lead time to get the charger is a real issue if you really want to accelerate your business and going fast. This number one. Number two is the software issue, where we face different tripping while the charging is happening. And this is also just give worries to the EV users, where they said, okay, is this going to impact our car? And the number three is the lack of skills in the region who can deal and fix the issue and the error things that happening in the charger. Thank you very much.
Okay, so right into the nuts and bolts, actually. Three elements there, challenges. Lead times for EV charging installation. Second, software issues. And thirdly, and this is more of a capacity issue, the skills in the region to actually install, maintain and operate charging equipment. So I think that's probably to all of you. So should we just go left to right? So Rohit, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So thank you for the question. And this is definitely the kind of question every implementer or end customer is coming to us to understand how do we monitor these chargers, because this technology is entirely new. We are talking about a new language, OCPP, Open Charge Point Protocol, which is exclusively developed for EV charging, and all the manufacturers are following the standards currently in the market. But at the end, it comes to the charge point development and also the back-end development on how they are bringing this OCPP into practice. Are they really taking the full use of this protocol? There's a set of around 150 to 200 standards that's been put, but there are not all the manufacturers and charge point developers taking advantage of this and making sure it's properly operating. To getting to your point, so one is monitoring the chargers, whether they are working fine, or how to solve the issues of these chargers when they are not working. So we, as CITA, as a charge point provider, we have the maximum integration possible in terms of OCPP 1.6 version. So, and our backend is also compatible with this. So every time an issue rises related to high voltage or low voltage issues, DC or AC leakage protection, or disconnection in the Wi-Fi network or the 4G connection, the platform gives an alert to the operator saying that the issue has caused related to this particular fault that is created either to the leakage or connectivity. So based on the alert, the system has an algorithm to understand these issues and try to restart the charger to make sure can it fix the issue first, instead of a person actually going on site to check whether it's working or not, to report back to the charge point operator. So we don't need to send a field technician every time a charger is not working. So the solution we offer is to check on the back end, and the back end itself tries to do the initial troubleshooting to make sure the charger is working fine. If it doesn't work, after further restarting of the charger, it gives you an alert and also an email or an SMS to say that this is constantly going offline and needs an attention. So, and you have the option to also remotely do firmware updates, restart the charger, fix any issues that's possible using the OCPP from our backend. And in terms of product support, we are one of the, I would say one of the only charge point operator manufacturer who is providing 24/7 support for our partners and end clients. So they can get in touch in 4 different channels. There is a hotline number, there's a website chat, there is WhatsApp support, and also email support. So we are available in all these channels to get instant support on any queries that you're looking for. And also resource sections on our website is helpful for instant troubleshooting as well.
Can you come to the mic, please?
Yeah.
talking about general problem here.
Electricity.
I'm talking about EV charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about which company is doing what. Is main how we solve this issue in a general concept.
Yeah. Got it. So may I try?
Abilash?
Okay. So, I mean, Mr. Almar, he actually brought out very important key points, which are actual problems on the ground right now. As implementers, we also face that problem. So getting the chargers are a problem because, as he said, the DC chargers, have modules inside them, and it is the sourcing of those modules that's actually causing the delay. The global chip shortage has affected everybody. So from your perspective, sir, I would really advise you to please plan ahead, because if you are planning for a pilot, don't just limit your planning to the pilot as of now. If you can give probably all of us probably an LOI would really make sense, with at least a 2 or 3 year plan so that we can actually differentiate or we can actually supply you the products based on your evolution plan. Just don't limit yourself. That is the way to mitigate this delays that are caused. See, 1 or 2 chargers for your initial pilots is quite easy. But if you, let's say, come to us with 20 chargers or 30 chargers, then sourcing them becomes a problem. So that's one advice that I would really appreciate people take into consideration. Because if there are people who are just opening their eyes into the EV world, I'm sorry, you guys are a bit late, for single pilots. I would really appreciate if you could plan for your ecosystem for the next 3 years or 4 years, plan it out, If you don't take them, it's fine. But right now, plan it out and probably give it to us so that we can plan our stocks or plan our supply chains accordingly. So that is something that I would really appreciate that can solve your problem and us, in fact. The second point is, of course, I would like to add to what Mr. Rohit said. The protocols are very important. From an electricity point of view, if there is no load, then it goes into a completely different kind of discussion. It's completely electric. And depending on the higher the power level of the charger, the type of regulations that comes in, they are different. So you need to plan for them. And looking at all the cars that you've seen here, please do ask them what is the maximum power level that the vehicle can charge. Then you will know that each one has different levels of powers, kilowatt in kilowatt. And the battery is in kilowatt hour. So please make sure that you differentiate between the two. They're like your liters going into your petrol tank at any point of time and the petrol capacity of the petrol tank. So these are completely different. So kilowatt is for protection. Just like how there is a force with which your petrol is pumped into your vehicle, that is kilowatt. The analogy is kilowatt. So depending on that, the protection levels, everything varies. So it gets into a bit more electrical, protecting yourself. So make sure that the components inside are very good. They can protect yourself. They don't cause unnecessary trippings. So, those kind of issues, they are basics and fundamentals of electricity, but with EV charging in the state it is right now, that becomes extremely important because when the customer comes in and plugs in the car, your vehicle shouldn't start tripping. If that happens, you're going to lose, your fuse on the car is going to blow out. And please make sure, because once that happens and your vehicle is connected to, an unauthorized or a substandard charger, which we see a lot of them coming from different parts of the world, particularly from China, if that happens, there is a possibility that you will lose a warranty on your car. That's a very important point which many of the consumers don't know. There are cars that have come from China which you can charge, with using adapters. But if it causes some kind of a short circuit or something, please understand nobody's going to help you. So that's a real problem in the market. The manufacturers have certain limitations because automobile is a highly regulated market. Electricity is a highly regulated market. If you don't follow the regulations, it's going to bite you. Just like how you don't want to walk in the middle of the road, you don't want to put a transformer right in the middle of the house. These are certain regulations for your protection. So please make sure that you follow those when you plan them out. The third point is, of course, in case the higher the power levels of the chargers, the higher the chances of tripping, the higher the planning needed. So you need to plan your load management. See, when you're actually buying a house or something, a typical house, you get about 5 kVA of load from the government. But when you go for any equipment larger than, let's say, 5 or 6 kVA, you need to have certain approvals needed from the utilities. So please make sure those approvals are in place before actually planning it out. EV chargers are not that simple. They're not like your plug points that you put at home. You can't use adapters separately to connect these. Just like how there is a transformer, there is a substation, these EV chargers can be thought of as independent substations. They are smart systems built to enable the power in your vehicle. And of course, the vehicle is smart as well. So this vehicle, when you connect it back into your grid or home or anywhere it is another load. It is like your HVAC system. It is like your, HVAC system is the best example I can give, because even if a HVAC system, trips, it's going to affect your entire building. An EV charger is, of course, it's not as complicated as that, because the vehicles have very, they are controlled, extremely controlled, so it's not as fluctuating as your HVAC. But please make sure that you plan it out. The third point is in terms of connectivities. The standards for OCPP are there so that you can monitor the chargers and enable extremely less downtime. You don't want the chargers to be off at any point of time. So predictive maintenance is quite important from a service point of view. So your chargers don't turn off and then you react. Then OCPP protocols are extremely important. OCPP 1.5 is 3-year-old technology, which currently is obsolete. So please plan for at least OCPP 1.6 or above. Even in 1.6, there are different versions from different parts of the world. There is OCPP 1.6 SOAP, which has become obsolete. Now the standard mostly used by everyone is OCPP 1.6 JSON. Please make sure that you read the differences between the two. I can get more technical, but better that you read it before actually planning for it. The future is OCPP 2.0. I don't know if Mr. Klaus from Sharon explained it. There are independent projects working to upgrade those. There are protocols called plug and charge. For example, when you plug your car into any of the chargers, a lot of protocols can happen in such a way that you don't have to get up from the car, go and press start, or provide your credit card and those things. In the future, the car is going to authenticate itself. It's going to authenticate with the regulators. It's going to authenticate with what key you are using and who is using the car, and it's going to charge you directly into your credit cards. So this entire ecosystem is based on the OCPP 2.0. It's called plug and charge. You can just search plug and charge in Google and you'll find it out. So please plan. When you're planning for this next 5 years, please think about what technology is going to come in the next 3 years, next 5 years, and then plan your ecosystem. Because you are planning for infrastructure. It's not a product. Infrastructure has to be designed for the next 10 years. So please plan out what's going to come in the next 10 years and then plan for the infrastructure. Because by the time you create your infrastructure, with the current technology, your infrastructure might become useless. So please make sure that is extremely important. What has been there in the market? See, I've been in this market for about 9 years now. I've seen several back and forths. But what has remained constant is whoever's stuck with open standards, whoever's stuck with protocols, they will survive. And that's what's happened in Europe. Now you see the way Europe has evolved, especially UK and Norway. They are perfect examples. So I request you to please look at examples over there. And of course, other parts of the world. I'm not saying that that's the only example that you need to. But in different parts of the world, different regions, different models have come up. And I really would like you to look into it, because EV charging infrastructure is a completely different ballgame. It's a completely different engineering that includes basics engineering, value engineering, and combined engineering put together. So, that's the best thing I can give you. Yeah, hope that explains a little bit of it.
Okay, thank you. Sahil, any points to add?
Thank you, Abilash. This was a very detailed information. As you rightly said, any electric charger is an extra load, whether it's a home charger, we need minimum 7 kilowatt. If you go for a slow charger, we need 22 kilowatt or a 44 kilowatt. When we go for fast chargers, it is 150, 300, as we have listened in the presentation. So adding this much load to the grid, as well as finding this much load and making the infrastructure possible to connect this, that is going to be the real challenge. Even if you want to connect, someone wants to buy a Tesla and just want to make an overnight charging with a small charger at his home, we have done survey at many homes, but there is no possibility to connect a 7 kilowatt charger. So in order to get that done, they have to go to the authority with all the procedures to get a new electricity connection, right from the NOC till the inspection. So this is something which we need to look at. Even the charging manufacturers can look into it if the kilowatt can be limited to, as you told, the kilowatt is just the power which is being taken at a point of time. So if it can be limited, matching the home power availability, that is one thing we can do. Secondly, adding solar-based power system to the grid so that they will be able to have the on-grid connection. When we go to infrastructures for 22 or 44 kilowatt in public buildings or parking spaces or even commercial buildings, one of the biggest challenges is the modification cost, which is required for the main panels or for bringing the cable at a long distance. In fact, the cost of this infrastructure is much, much more than the cost of a charger, and it reaches maybe the cost of an EV. So this is something we need to have in focus for the upcoming generation. As you rightly said, we should plan ahead. We should plan at least for 5 to 10 years ahead. Any new buildings which is being constructed should have the provision for electric vehicle charger, depending on the kilowatt which we are expecting, because the evolution will never stop as long as the user have that acceptance or that satisfaction on the charging speed, as well as the batteries are becoming cheaper and affordable to all. So this will continue evolving. So we have to look forward what will be the final result, and our infrastructure should be based on that final goal. That's my point on it.
Okay, thank you, Sahil. Last but not least, Ivan, and I think could you pick up on the third point, I think, or third bit of the question?
For sure. So the first point, I will try to be very straight, okay? So the first point is lead time, okay? So of course that I talk in my presentation when starting COVID and the Russian war, Ukrainian war, okay, affect a lot of the manufacturers, okay? So we have to create plans for it, okay, to attack that, okay? For example, in 3 years ago, okay, my factory produced 60 chargers, okay, per week. Right now, I cannot do that, okay? It's impossible, okay? So what we have done in the last years, okay? So because what's changed is the shortage of the materials and all the stuff, and also the prices regarding the inflation that we have right now, okay? So we have to negotiate with our supply chain, and our supply chain is very huge. The problem is the ships, regarding the COVID, a lot of factories close, okay? So they close, the lead time, that normal lead time that's been for 6 weeks to 10 weeks, increased to 45 weeks. It's almost 1 year, okay? So we cannot survive on this. So what we have done, okay, we create plan B, C, and D, and we create a task force with automakers to help us because they have a lot of empowerment on this one, okay? And for example, our chargers that we launched to the market, we lost eight months of time to market because we have to have the board A, B, and C, and D, and all the boards certified. Now, we are returning to the normal lead times. We hope in September we return because we have working these long years in the plan, okay? So now I have my charger certified with board A, B, and C, and D. So if I have another COVID-20 or something, okay, I'm prepared for it, okay? Second question that you talk is about the standards and all the stuff. Okay, the standard is not enough. Okay, let's be honest. Okay, we have OCPP 1.5. Okay, a long time ago. CPP 2.0. Everyone is talking about 3-4 years ago. Okay, and for example, I give you a very use case. OCPP 1.6. How you can manage credit cards? You cannot manage. You have to use a data transfer, the part of the protocol to use that. The manufacturers need data. Okay, so of course we have our own protocol. We must have it, okay? So that's the only way I can download the logs from the chargers, see what is the problem because the charger, okay, OCPP is only connection from the charger to the system, don't are providing any kind of information of the car. What is the current that the car is requesting, okay, what is the load and all the stuff, the deep technology, the Mac of the car, you don't have it, okay? You have it on OCPP 1.6 and plus, okay? So the third question is the skills, okay? So what we are doing, everything is HOTA, upgrade over the air. That's our focus, okay? And we have in our partners, okay, we have what we call Efacec Academy, okay, when we form all our partners to do the commissioning, the setup, and the first level, second level, and third level, okay? The only way that we can go to the market and have aggressive SLA like 95%, okay, I have to have the access to remote and I have a data center to support it, okay? So I think all the questions, it's fine? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If anyone else has any questions, we will come back in a few minutes, so just hold the thought. I think we just done quite a deep dive into a number of detailed issues there. I'd like to kind of just have a slightly broader question again to all of the panel. And this is really about the structure of the sector, and particularly the roles of government and public agencies versus the role of the private sector, because you're clearly all from the private sector and providing or managing EV charging networks. In Europe, you know, the development of EV charging infrastructure is predominantly private sector led. Here in the GCC, we tend to have a bit more of a guiding hand from government and from public agencies. Would you like to comment on what the roles and responsibilities are of public versus private sectors in solving the charging problem and moving us forward? What is government good at and should be doing, and what is the private sector good at and should be doing? And indeed, what does the private sector want to see from government and the public sector in terms of making progress? So we'll actually go the other way now, so we'll start with Ivan.
Okay, so private and public is do two different things. So I will count a very quickly history for a friend of mine that started a company. He started a company with 2 chargers, okay? So it was in the private sector. And then he started to put on public, okay? And he look, yeah, the public, yeah, it's good, but yeah, I want to create some kind of revenue, okay? So I will invest a lot on private. So we have a contract with Ubers, okay? And now they have more than 500 chargers, okay? And he get an investment of 150 million last week, okay? So they are deploying chargers from Portugal, France, UK, Poland, and Italy, I think so, okay? So on private, okay, we have that use case that you can take advantage from business from other persons, like you create a e-hub or something, okay, that you can explore, like Ubers, taxis, okay, and that's a private one, okay? Must be inside something, okay? And the public, independent of every country have different laws, okay? So in Portugal, you can use that kind of concept, but in other countries, you cannot use it, okay? And the other part that is private is, for example, the fleets, okay? Of course, if you want to do this change, okay, you have to have infrastructure. The infrastructure will push for sure the demand of the EVs, okay? And you can use that for example, for companies and so on, okay? Looking to the public, okay, for example, you are seeing, okay, a lot of incentives in different countries, okay, different regions, okay? So normally the incentives is, okay, you buy electric vehicle and you have this kind of incentive, okay, but yeah, if you don't have an infrastructure, it makes no sense, okay? I can charge at home, but if I want to drive 400 miles, whatever, I cannot do it, okay? So I need the infrastructure, okay? So in some kind of countries, they are doing the incentive, okay? For example, you install a 50 kilowatt chargers, okay? And you have incentive of 25% of installation in the charger, okay? That's for sure will help because, you know, to get the payback from the installation of the charger in a public way in every country is a challenge because you have to pay a lot of taxes and something, okay? So normally the spot is not yours, so you have to pay the rent or revenue share. Then you have to pay a fee for the government. Then you have to pay the fee to the CPO, okay? So if we're doing your business plan, okay, you take 10 years, okay, to get the payback, okay? So of course the government have to push and give this kind of incentives, okay? And also the recovery of the economy, that we call the package of recovery that they are giving for the Europeans, like for example, Portugal are receiving the first one. Most of part of it is to install EV chargers infrastructure to support all this huge demand. Of course, the package, we cannot install chargers anywhere, okay? You need to prepare the grid for it, okay? Of course, part of the investment will be the grid because you cannot install a EV charger 120 kilowatts, 350 kilowatts without upgrading the grid. And for sure, the part of the investment is upgrading the grid and put all the sensors that you need to not have outage on a network, okay? Just trying to be very quick. Thank you.
Okay. Sahil?
I think in this part of the world, in UAE and MENA region, if you look at the model of selling electricity, it's always regulated by the authority. So even when we have a solar and renewable energy generation happening, there are some models which is agreed, but it is under strict regulation with the authorities. So I believe this will continue, and that is required also to set the standards to ensure the safety and also to have some control on this whole system on a long run. So definitely it will be regulated. This is what my opinion about it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I have a little bit different perspective because depending on the segment, it's a bit different. You know, if it's something like, let's say, apartment complexes, you know. So apartment complexes have public spaces and private spaces. So private spaces, obviously, you install the chargers and, you know, they can be one of your load. Just treat it like a fridge. You know, the smaller chargers do fit into that requirement. But if you want to charge multiple cars, you know, then it's a challenge. You cannot, I mean, if your apartment is on the 52nd floor, you know, and your car is in the basement, you know, you don't want to, you know, put a cable all the way from the 52nd floor down. So then what happens is then you'll have to work with the facility management team and connect it to probably a common area, you know, and then they can actually provide it as a service to the customer, you know, who are their own customers. So it does fall under the private category, but of course it's part of the additional service that the building owner can provide to, you know, possibly the customer. Similar to actually premium parking. You know, every building in this region has something called premium parking. So it's kind of like a service on that. And of course, all the electricity that goes on to your lighting, everything is actually billed separately through a meter. So this can also be part of that entire circuit and possibly charge the customer based on that. So that's one model where, you know, which nobody actually needs any kind of regulation at this point, because it's the loads are already applied for. The building loads are there in high-rise buildings, so we can do that. But, you know, you will have to inform Deva about your load circuits. You know, there is an SLT that needs to be submitted to the government to make sure that, you know, at any point of time, even after 10 years, let's say somebody wants to add something else to the building, you know, they know that, you know, your LV panels, there are all these spare breakers are connected to something else. So that's an information sharing that needs to be done. But from a regulatory point of view, you know, in other parts of the world, what you've seen is in these kind of private applications, you don't get the support of the government. But there are parking lots, you know, public parking lots where, you know, government owns them, government manages them. So there could be some kind of a subsidy, kind of like a PPP model, the public-private partnership model, you know, where somebody else can come in, install the chargers, own, manage, and operate them. Anyway, you need to pay the, the rental fees for the space. You know, you need to pay for electricity. So you are anyway going to pay the government, right? So anyway, that revenue can also be reinvested into these kind of public-private partnerships and actually increase the number of EV charging stations. I think that's something not many have thought about. That's a very good initiative. I mean, yesterday's panel, the regulatory team spoke in detail about them. We are already doing it for things like solar, by the way. We do buy them in terms of kilowatt. This can be something similar to that. Bulk power planning. You know, so that's an ecosystem that is not yet evolved, and I think that's where the government has to focus and try to create a regulatory framework for that, and that would really enable charging at different modes. See, electricity is there everywhere. You know, now all around us we have electricity. How do you tap it is going to be up to you. Leave that to the experts. You know. But please do support them with kind of a regulatory framework, because for electricity and electrical systems, nobody plans extra money. Please understand that. even for the vehicles. You might have seen the vehicles, but how many of these car manufacturers have told you about the charges? Nobody tells you about them. The reason for that is electricity is taken for granted, electrical systems are taken for granted, because ultimately it's part of a different value of engineering that is provided. And I think that's something to be focused on. And after about 60 years, the entire electrical network is changing. And that's where I really hats off to countries like UK, countries like Norway, who have actually thought far ahead and implemented those frameworks. And without this public-private partnership model, I don't think that acceleration would have happened, which is, of course, the second phase. Before that is the incentives. Government is already giving the incentives, so I'm not going to talk about them. But incentives are just a short-term add-ons. But for electric vehicle charging to sustain for a longer period of time, these kind of partnerships and other private companies have to come in. The new model, the new business models that I was talking about are charge point operators. There should be more charge point operators in the market. And there are protocols for that too. We were talking about open charge point protocol, the OCPP, right? That is also an open charge point integration, OCPI, which is between different charge point operators. Let's say a customer comes from Europe and wants to have an electric vehicle here, and he has a home location, then there should be a sharing between the operator there and the operator here, so that they can also keep sharing the data. We have a model like that with ATMs. You're aware, right? So that same model can also be applicable here. So we just have to look, rather than getting stuck in a box, we have to look at different segments to understand what type of a complex model that we can provide. And software these days can help us enable all these in a much easier fashion. That's possibly it.
And lastly, Rohit.
Thank you, Mr. Nair. I would like to just add to the points of Mr. Nair here. So he pointed out that unlike the regular fuel that required for the mobility right now, like the petroleum, the electricity is all around us. It's just how we tap into it and take advantage of it to electrify the mobility industry. So, I would think that if the governments in this part of the world, in the Middle East especially, if they ease and diversify the private and public charging sectors, the private could be like the places where we spend a lot of time, at home, in workplace, in malls, in commercial buildings, where there can be a lot of EV charging stations with load balancing technologies, so it can adapt to an existing infrastructure rather than bringing in a new infrastructure that is going to cost a lot of money to the building management. So, and setting regulations as a private and public could encourage more people to invest into the infrastructure, because we can see feedback from the industry and from the building management people that they are interested in providing EV infrastructure, because they have tenants in the buildings and the clients in the buildings who are using electric vehicle, but they are not able to bring this infrastructure in place because of the regulation and norms in different parts. I'm not naming specific country or region here. That's limiting them to immediately deploy this solution in place. So if they diversify this to private and public sector, where the private has some kind of a guideline to set a tariff or set the rules and regulations on how it has to be installed in terms of safety features, in terms of how they can charge the end client, then it would be like much more encouraging for people to invest on electric vehicle and electrify future. Thank you.
Okay. So just to move the debate on, a lot of the exhibition outside and a lot of the debate, of course, has been around the electrification of cars and the supply of electric vehicle charging equipment for cars. Now, if we just move to perhaps a bit more of a niche area, but anything that isn't a car, so specifically focusing on urban buses, on intercity coaches, on long distance trucks, all of which we have here in the UAE. What are the challenges around, particularly, and we'll leave the debate about battery electric versus hydrogen or fuel cell to, I think that's another session. But assuming that battery electric is the way forward for at least some of these vehicle types, what are the challenges around the charging infrastructure for those vehicle types? You'll be aware that there was a trial in Dubai, which is just finished, around so-called opportunity charging for an urban bus between Al Sousa and Nair. And there was a charging infrastructure element to that trial. But moving forward, is this a future trend, and we're very much kind of immature technology and we have some way to go? What's going to be the way forward for the large commercial vehicles and how we charge those? So that's open to all of you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take the first bite out of that. So we've done we were quite successful in doing the charging for the electric bus pilot project. The pantograph has been quite a challenge, in fact, but we were quite happy that the type of support that we received from the government to actually see through this pilot and try to plan it out. It's really hats off to the team. But the challenges that we face is, first, of course, finding the right spot to install these chargers. So for that you need to plan the route. If you don't plan the route, it's not going to be easy. So that is a level of urban planning that also needs to come in and needs to be enabled to actually plan this out. And of course, the vehicle, the charger, the implementer and the operator, has to come together, share information to plan that urban planning out. And that's where I feel a silo kind of approach is not going to work. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure is a collaborative environment. It needs to be a collaboration because everyone cannot. For example, of course, 80% of the total budget will go to buses and the vehicle itself. But it's not like you can bring in any charging technology and try to integrate it and think that can happen. So there are companies, bus companies and truck companies who think we can bring in the vehicles and then plan for charging. It's not going to work, because ultimately you might be the leader right now, but at a later stage, if someone else brings in a new technology, it should be compatible to the existing technology. You don't want to spend another new infrastructure cost, just adding or creating that infrastructure. So better to collaborate with your own peers and try to plan it out. That's where open standards are really important, and you can see what's happening in Europe. Independently, everyone's working on different parts of the ecosystem, but when you look at it from the top bird's eye view, it's all part of the same EV charging network. So having that network plan is quite important, especially with government leading the way. So there is a term called system operators. So the concept of system operators should come in so that they can be the people on the ground, so that no one misuses the knowledge that they have. Being neutral is quite important. And that is what is going to help enable these technologies. For example, you said from city to city, right? So both City 1 and City 2 should have a similar framework for the buses to travel between them. And similarly for the trucks. Every truck and every implementer, every warehouse should have a similar setup so that the same truck can travel from one place to another. In the early stages of EV evolutions, I can use an example from China. Initially, some of the Generation 1 vehicles, you buy a car in Beijing and then you drive it out to, let's say, Shanghai, this car is not going to work. Because ultimately you will have to buy chargers from the same city because they have collaborated with each other. But between cities, it never used to happen. After about 7 years now, I see that cities have now started talking to each other. And that's extremely important to happen even here. So that's something I think it's in progress, but there's more work to be done. And let's not deviate, rather than just look at the goals and move forward. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can say something. Okay. So regarding the industry, the EV makers and automakers, whatever the name that you want to pronounce, so they have to stabilize the powertrain. Otherwise, we will not buy a normal car, EV car, with a low-cost price. Because if every time you are changing the production line, okay, you cannot create cars in mass. So yeah, you have to stabilize the powertrain, and the powertrain means charging experience. Okay. Looking to the chart, so what the industry think some years ago we want to create the same experience. We don't want anything new. Okay, so you see pantographs. We are doing the same with trains a long time ago. Yeah. Okay, for example, for the EV drivers, okay, just plug a cable is the same experience that you are going to the fuel station. It's similar. It's the same. Of course, now that we are on that point that we have to connect all the dots and we can create something new. You see some kind of brands that do swapping batteries, okay? Yeah, maybe can be a solution. But I think, in my opinion, automated systems, for example, automated plugs, okay, just park your car. And because the big constraint that you have right now is, okay, if a powertrain have more power, you have to give them more amps. Okay, and that's a big challenge. To support more amps, you need a huge cable with a huge diameter, okay? Otherwise, you must have a cooling system, but the cooling system has two phases because you have to do more maintenance. And for example, if you have a huge cable that is automated, don't need human intervention, maybe it's the future, okay? But everyone is thinking on that. But for now, what the industry are thinking is to everyone have the same experience, otherwise no one will change it. After they have the experience to have EV, okay, the manufacturers can have this in mass scale, okay, because they have stabilized the powertrain so they can supply to everyone, and then they will go to other level, okay? That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, before I ask the last question, any more questions from the audience? So, please.
Hello, good evening. So I come from Egypt. Okay, we do electrical services and building automation services. So I actually have two questions. One is regarding the ecosystem of the EV infrastructure. As you explained, there's a service provider, and then you have the CPO, and you have the MSP service provider. Okay, so one of the things in Egypt is that they're trying to push the mobilization, the e-mobility sector, but they only provide licensing for the whole vertical solution. So you have to have the e-mobility service provider and the CPO. Other companies like us, for example, we come from an electrical background, so we can do the installations and the after sales and everything, but we are not capital intensive to go to do all the full solutions. We don't have the advertising power, the marketing, and so on and so forth. So I was wondering, in more advanced countries, is there this segregation available, or is it not? Because now, for example, in Egypt, we maximum have 5 operators. There's no way that we can provide the e-mobility infrastructure that's required by 2030 with only these 4 and 5 companies. Okay, that's the first question. Second question is, we also do building automation, and you mentioned SCADA, like SCADA systems for operating e-mobility charging points. Right now, all I see is that the SCADA system report for the infrastructure, EV infrastructure, is separate, where there are lots of large companies that do already the infrastructure for the electrical, for the lighting, the HVAC, which does more like 70 or 80%. In the future, do you see these two software platforms integrating, or do you see them also be separate and integrating in the energy part? Because smart management and electrical management is multiples for buildings, multiples of the EV infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good question, okay? Okay, so I will start from the last question, okay? So that's not so true, okay? For example, we have our CPMS, okay, that is like the rough mode, the SCADA from the chargers connected to the SCADA system of a distributor, okay? We have a standard protocol, we have that in USA, and we have that in Europe also, okay? What this kind of information is valuable? Because they provide, because it's one more load, it's like a smart meter, you know, so you have to measure that load. And because the distribution, the SCADA, they are controlling all the assets, okay, and they have the forecast for the secondary substation when they are overloaded or not, okay? So they are sending some set points, okay, for the forecast for us to use in a smart charging. But that is in a pilot, yeah, for sure. But for sure in some countries like Sweden and Switzerland, okay, they are not so advanced in technology, but they are putting some kind of devices before the chargers. If they need to unplug the chargers, they just send a signal, a broadcast signal, and unplug. But for sure, the way is that we are talking. I have a presentation in Sweden about 4 years ago that talked about that subject, that our vision from Efacec, all the systems might be connected. Otherwise, if you have a distribution SCADA that is controlling all the assets is not connected to the final loads, and you are putting smart meters, lower voltage, all the stuff, okay, is one more load. We have to control it, okay? It makes no sense to control. Of course, you have to look what the EV driver want, but you have to look what kind of load you can support it. Otherwise, you have outage and all the stuff, problems on the grids and so on, okay? Similar like hubs, okay? When you have a storage, when you put that on in production, okay, you have to test it in off-grid, okay? Then, if it works nice off-grid, you can integrate on the grid. Because you know when you put more energy on the grid, you can put trash, okay? And you have to do that step by step. Okay, so this is the final question. From the first question, you know that we have been in electric mobility a long time ago, and we see countries starting from the scratch, okay, and now they are very advanced, okay. So every time I talk to a client, I say, just try it, okay. Just try it, the experience, okay, and get the lesson learned, okay. Because in every country you'll see everything is different, okay? Because you want, for example, in Portugal, we have the CPO, EMSP is the same guy, okay? For example, that guy that we're talking, that is a very good friend of mine, that the company start very small, now they get the investment, 150 million euros, okay? And they start very small. They experience with Uber, okay? They learn a lot, okay? They go to the fleets, they learn a lot. They go to public, they learn a lot, okay? And they adapt. And they do all the stuff, okay? CPO, EMS, okay? So, my opinion, just start with a small pilot, test it, okay? Just change some points with your government, okay? Give them today experience, and they will give you something for sure, okay? That's my opinion, my experience, that it's the best way. Also, for example, we have a huge project in Las Vegas, casinos, okay? My client have a letter of intention to install about 500 chargers in 1 year, okay? So, they want to have a perfect solution, okay? And I told them, look, the guys that's going to casinos is not the same guys that you have from the public, okay? Because you have a valet, okay? In the valet, you don't need anything, okay? We have automated, we have the valets that will park the cars and will manage all the stuff, okay? So, just install, try it, okay? And then you do the fine tunings for sure, okay? That's my advice, okay?
Just
very briefly, and then I'll move to the last question. So,
right. So, I mean, one advice, so one problem. I mean, I call it a problem because over here, electrical systems or electrical expertise is not independently identified. You know, you introduce yourself as a contractor, right? So you fall under the category of MEP contractors. So that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. All three needs different sets of engineering. Right? So clubbing them together itself is a problem. Because, you know, only an electrical engineer is going to understand this. And electricity is even more challenging because you have low voltage, you have high voltage, you have medium voltages, and, you know, different levels of electricity. The higher the power, the completely different the engineering. So ultimately, a normal electrician cannot do EV charging because the discussions are different. The type of electrical points or the electrical safety measures, everything is different, you know. So when you club it all together, you are bound to lose some expertise, you know, and that's the problem. That's happening across the Middle East. And of course, the reason for that is building sector was growing fast. So there were companies with certain expertise, certain packages that came in and chipped in, if we can understand that. But now we are moving into a smart city kind of a world right now. So the moment you move on to smart cities, open standards, common protocols are coming in. In building automation, you have open standards like KNX and others which are currently being used. Those systems are now compatible with the OCPP, which is particular to. So these are module patches within the smart or building automation that you see. You know, so ultimately, as he said, from a practical point of view, better to create the pilot, bring in some open standards, show it to the government, they're going to help you on that. But don't club it all together into one project, you know. So EV charging independently will happen. Your building automation independently will happen. Then then the monitoring system for these two is just a single form with certain parameters. So that integration can happen later, you know. So that's very simple. When you have control into the picture, you know. So in cases of EV charging, if the load is high, just a small ping has to go back to the system saying that, okay, this EV charger is drawing too much electricity. And then another ping back saying, okay, now please control your power. That's it. A small 2 pings. This is one way of control that is already happening, which is actually the smart meter technology. But depending on the time of communication, it keeps going shorter and shorter. And that is a functional level change that you can test it out within your pilot. So don't think that somebody is going to come in and give you the complete package altogether and then expect you to implement it, because that is what the government will expect, but everything is independent. Just like your mobile phones. Mobile phones, BlackBerry, iPhone, everyone had completely different interfaces, right? But now what's happened? They've all come together because somebody has taken that time and tried to integrate and show that an app is common and that app can work on all these systems. Of course, a bit of changes are needed, but somebody has taken the effort to do it. And that's the reason why now the evolution has come up. Same thing is going to happen there as well. It will take a bit more time because there are bigger things involved. Physical buildings are involved, so it will take a bit more time. So if the mobile phone took, let's say, 5 years to change, the building might take 10, 15 years to change, because that's infrastructure. Could be 50 years to change, because you're talking about the world. So that's something that I feel you should be on the lookout, and being in the building automation space is the best thing for you, because that's where the new investments are going to come in.
Okay. Final question, and we are out of time, so you have 30 seconds each to answer this, and I'm afraid it's a big one.
Wow.
Net zero, decarbonisation of road transport, sustainable mobility will not be achieved unless we have a sustainable supply chain. So what are each of you doing in terms of your planning to link charging infrastructure to green sources of energy, either fully renewable on site or through discussions with the electricity distributors, so that customers who want sustainable mobility know that the electricity they're receiving is truly green? 30 seconds each, please.
All right.
For me?
So talking about sustainable mobility, so this cannot happen in just like in public sector. They can just like deploy solar solutions for each and every individual. So it has to happen from every individual. They need to invest on solar infrastructure and invest on charging infrastructure that can work with solar, that can communicate with solar PV systems and take that battery power to charge your electric vehicle. And also bi-directional charging is also something that's coming out in the market. People are bringing out bi-directional charging, where you can take the power from your electric vehicle to charge your, I mean like use power at your house. That's also possible now. Like there are places in the UK, in the Europe, where they are charging the vehicle at non-peak hours, since they have like different tariffs during peak and non-peak hours, and they are using that power inside the electric vehicle to power up the houses. So that's one way of sustainable method to like move forward, that you have a complete ecosystem, like you have the solar, you have the electric vehicle, and then both is helping you to run your household.
Okay. Abilash?
Right.
30 seconds?
Yeah, I know. That's quite, that's a big topic, but I'll try my best. So on one side, you have the buildings, right? So it's application-based usage. So when you have the electric vehicles, as you said, that is vehicle to grid that is coming. So that's the next evolution for the chargers, and because they are this connecting link between the grid and of course the car. So when the cars are in use, or let's say when the cars are fully charged, and they are parked in your office spaces, from morning to evening, they are also a battery. So rather than just providing separate battery packs, to buildings, your cars that are connected to your buildings can themselves act like an extra set of battery, to actually mitigate that solar radiation, can maximize the energy. So these kind of systems are called microgrids. These can be planned within the building itself. And of course, there are already technologies out there which can enable this kind of a balancing act between the different sources of energy. We used to think, you have these UPSs, right? So those are switching logics. But when you move on to a microgrid system, the source will change. If it's in the mornings, then solar is more, so it will go to solar. In the evenings, on the highways, all the cars drive past. You have windmills right over there, so that can also be enabled. So different sources can be connected to your building to actually make it completely net zero. People think of these as independent systems, but I feel that all of them have to be integrated together to actually make it all happen, right? So that's what we have, so please do plan them out.
Okay, Sahil?
Yeah, well, as I pointed out from the initial stage, compensating each of your electric vehicle load with a green energy source like a solar panel is very important. In the upcoming years, the electric vehicle market is going to grow at the annual rate of, let's say, 7 to 10%. So the load demand is also getting increased. So whatever is the additional load which is required at the grid has to be compensated with a green energy source. So that is a basic way to compensate it and achieve the target.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Finally?
So to respond to that kind of solution, we have created eHub, okay, that we can connect our chargers to a storage, PVs, okay, and we can supply green energy. Of course, it makes no sense to use energy from the grid if you are using gas or something like that. And because we have the connection of the SCADAs and all the production, we know what kind of energy they are producing for renewables like hydric and so on. Okay, so and we try to use that energy. Okay, that's the answer that they are working. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. So I'm not going to try and summarize the discussion. I think we've gone from a helicopter view to some deep dives into some very practical and commercial and kind of customer issues. And challenges. There are great opportunities, but there are also very significant challenges on a whole range of areas kind of moving forward. And that's just on the charging equipment. Forget the vehicles and the batteries, which is another set of challenges as well. So I think it's been a great hour of discussion. So just to create a bit of an echo, can we just thank Rohit, Abilash, Sahil, and Ivan in the usual way, please? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.